Hi, it's Laura Aquamarine 18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome or welcome back. This is my TBR video for July 2024, wherein I will share the books that I have curated for myself to read in the coming month, but that you and I both know I may or may not actually get to. You will see from my June monthly recap, I'm sure. I haven't filmed it yet, but I did not read all of the books I planned to in June. One of them has moved forward into July because it's in progress, and a couple of them just didn't happen. So I do find making the TBR its own kind of fun, whether I get to the books or not. I think it's almost its own hobby separate from actually reading books. So I'm enjoying these TBR videos, even though they really don't reflect what I end up reading in any given month. This TBR for July doesn't have a cohesive theme or anything necessarily. It is more non-fiction heavy than usual. There are reasons for that, which I will get into. It is 2,125 pages total, some of which I've already read, as one book, as I mentioned, is in progress. And it's a little bit shorter than I usually go. 2,125 is not overly ambitious for me in terms of page count, but with this list being predominantly nonfiction, several books that lean more academic, and one of them involving writing exercises, I think it is ambitious in other ways, so I didn't want to overdo it. So without further ado, the first book that I will mention is one that I already talked about in my June TBR that I am partway through, but not finished, so it's rolling forward into July. I've talked about this book a number of times on this channel. That is Pantheology's Gods, Worlds, Monsters by Mary Jane Rubenstein. I have read this book before, but I'm rereading it because I chose it as a book for my AODA Druidry apprentice curriculum. I am taking notes. I have a notebook insert in there because part of the curriculum involves writing an essay, a very short essay, relating to some of the philosophy texts that we have read, and I know that this one will figure prominently into my essay, and I'll be discussing some texts that are part of the Druid revival tradition as well. So this is fairly slow going. I'm on page 32 out of about 290 something pages. So I'm making my way through. I really love this book. It is a 5-star book to me, no question. It is a kind of historical and theoretical account of pantheist thinking and critiques of pantheist thinking and the kind of political potential of pantheist thinking as well in terms of things like environmentalism. I really, really like this book. I've talked about it numerous times, so I won't say too much more here. But I'm really looking forward to actually, hopefully, finishing this so that I can get to my essay and get one step closer to completing my apprenticeship with the AODA and moving on to candidate. Now, the next book on my TBR is a bit, I think, of probably an unexpected one, and there's a context for it that partly relates to the tangent that I ended up on in June. The next book on my TBR is The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This is a very widely read, widely translated work of Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius lived 121 to 180 CE and was the 16th Roman emperor. So these are a collection of his notebooks that were not necessarily intended for publication, but which elaborate, particular prominent philosophical ideas of the time in an interesting way. I have never read this before. It is definitely taking me back. I minored in philosophy in undergrad. I was in my undergraduate degree from 2005 to 2009, and ancient philosophy was absolutely not my major area of interest, but I've read a decent amount of it, I would say. So I'm interested to read this, but this is not a random choice. So the reason that this is here is because in June, I also started reading, and this was not on my TBR, and it's not on my TBR for July either, because I know I'm not going to finish it. I started reading Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan. And I started reading Hellenistic Astrology by Chris Brennan because I signed up for Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology course, which is a self-paced, series of modules that include videos and required reading and suggested reading and some quizzes and some activities. And it's quite an extensive course. It's going to take me, I think, a good amount of time to get through. But it starts off with some history and historical context for Hellenistic astrology, as well as some philosophical context, which is the part that I'm just finishing now. And the Marcus Aurelius meditations are suggested as a text to get some theoretical context of the kind of intellectual and theoretical philosophical kinds of conversations that were happening at the time that Hellenistic astrology is emerging and being practiced. So that is why I'm reading Marcus Aurelius. I didn't pick it at random. I feel like it's the most, it really kind of sticks out in terms of what I usually choose, but there is that context for it. I feel like starting this course and starting the astrology, the Hellenistic astrology book explains why I feel like in June I haven't gotten through much of my TBR, because I kind of ended up on this sidetrack that wasn't entirely planned. Basically, the course went on sale. And I'm very happy to have started it. I'm really enjoying it so far. So that will take up some of my reading time. It's also why, in terms of page count, I haven't gone maybe as high as usual in this TBR, because I know I'll be reading this other book, the Hellenistic astrology book, so that will account for some pages read as well. That I'm really enjoying so far. If you've ever taken this course or any other Hellenistic astrology course, let me know and tell me what you thought of it. I'm really into it so far. I'm not very far though. I'm in the kind of pre-material, the history and theory, before we actually get to any of the techniques, but so far, so good. The next book on my TBR, as I have talked about, I made a video about this, is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This book, of course, begins set in 2024. I believe it spans 2024 to 2027, and it was written in the early 90s. So I already have a video up about reading Parable, and if you want to read Parable with me, it is not too late to join. I have made a Discord server just for reading along, and if the Discord server persists for more read-alongs in the future, then fabulous. If it doesn't, that's okay. If you want to come into the Discord server to read this with us, then just send me an email, aquamarinexvii, that's 18 in Roman numerals, @gmail.com. My email is also in my kind of YouTube About Me section, so you can find it. And I will send you a link to join that server. I've talked about this book in a number of other videos, so I won't say too much more here. Suffice to say that Octavia Butler is, one of my all-time favorite authors. This is a reread for me as well, but it's not something that I've read recently. And, it's an intense one. I think it's an important one. It's a book that poses a lot of really important, I think, political questions. And reading it in 2024 feels particularly important, I think. So I'm looking forward to reading Parable of the Sower, and that's 345 pages long. Though that includes kind of a foreword and some reading group questions at the end of the book. That's the whole book. The next book on my TBR is one that's going to sound familiar because it was on my June TBR and I just didn't get to it. And that is Culpa Imperial, The Greatest Empire That Never Was by Angelica Gorodischer. This is a kind of interconnected set of short stories. The author is Argentinian, and it's a book that is translated by Ursula Le Guin, which was one of the things that jumped out at me when I came across it. I've already given a bit of an account of it in my previous TBR video, so I won't go over it again. I plan to this month really stretch Parable out over the course of the month for the purpose of discussing it with other folks who are reading it. And I don't like reading multiple novels at the same time. I'm just finding that I'm prone to getting a little bit confused. So that's really the main reason that my TBR for July is so nonfiction heavy, and also why now the only other, being the Kalpa Imperial, the only other work of fiction that I've chosen is short fiction, so that I can kind of dip in and out of it and not, get it confused or intermingled with reading Parable. So there's context for that. I'm looking forward to this. I think it will be an interesting read. I also hope to read Speak of Ursula Le Guin, something that's been on my pile of books for a very long time, and that is Steering the Craft, which is Ursula Le Guin's, it's based on a workshop, a book about writing. So this is a kind of handbook. And this is the one that I had mentioned has writing exercises associated with it. So the chapters in this book include the sound of your writing, punctuation and grammar, sentence length, repetition, point of view and voice, changes in point of view, etc. And there are writing exercises, 10 of them, associated with these different chapters. And one of my resolutions for 2024, which I have not yet made any move on despite the year being half over, is to write something fictional. And so if the exercises in this book are the only thing fictional that I write all year, I will have at least written something. So I figure this is a good time to start, and finding the Gorodischer book, Kalpa Imperial, translated by Ursula Le Guin, made me remember this being on my shelf and get it out for this month. This feels daunting to me. It's not a very long book. It's 139 pages, but writing fiction feels very daunting to me, but I would really like to try. And I probably won't share any of it, but I'm looking forward to giving it a go and seeing how I feel. So I want to read this one in July, and I figure taking some of my vacation time this month gives me some time to, sit with that and do some work there. Another book that has been on my shelf for a while that I've been planning to read and haven't gotten around to that I would like to read in July is this collection, Dialogue Tales of the Natural World, How the Moon Fooled the Sun, and Other Santeria Stories. This is a collection that was suggested to me in the context of my having picked up the Iyami Oracle, which I have been working with the past week or so, and that, tends to be a kind of summary deck for me. It's really, really beautiful deck. So this one I am really looking forward to. And the back of the book reads in part that this collection presents more than 40 patakis that shed light upon the worldview of Santeria. Each story in this collection, reassembled from the oral tradition of the African diaspora, is centered on a spiritual principle in nature: the waxing and waning of the moon, solar and lunar eclipses, the phenomenon of shooting stars, the separation of sky and earth, and the origins of the animals and birds who play key roles in Santeria symbology. Revealing the metaphysics, theology, and philosophy of the Yoruba people, this volume shows these stories to be as powerful and relevant today as they were to the ancient Yoruba who once safeguarded them. And so this collection really sounds like something I'm going to enjoy. I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't really read anything like this before, so this I think will be really, really interesting. And the book has inside a 14-page introduction, and it explains some of the context for the different stories. And then it also has a glossary and index at the back. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Finally, the last two books on my list are nonfiction choices that are kind of inspired by the fact that we are reading Parable of the Sower this month. One is a book that I've had on my shelf again. I picked up some time ago, just haven't gotten around to, but it feels like a good time to read it. And that is Literary Afrofuturism in the 21st Century, edited by Isaiah Lavender III and Lisa Jacek. I have read nonfiction about Afrofuturism previously, but not a book that focuses specifically on literature. So the other book that I read on Afrofuturism included a lot of things like music and film. So this one is a bit of a different focus, and it is a anthology of essays. So there are 12 essays in this book, one of which is a round table of different authors, and then there's all different topics. So there's an essay on Black women writers, one on Afrofuturism as alternate American history, one on Nalo Hopkinson's work, and I read a Nalo Hopkinson novel in June, one on YA Afrofuturism. There's one on N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy, which I love. There are lots of interesting ones, some of which are on works of fiction that I have not read, so that will be interesting. I am looking forward to this. It is a definitely scholarly book. It's published by the Ohio State University Press as part of a series of books called New Sons, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in the Speculative, which I'm really interested in looking more at the other books that might be in that series, because that, of course, you know, with the speculative fiction genres being those that I read the most of, is definitely a series that sounds of interest. Finally, I have a advanced copybook from NetGalley that I'm including in my TBR as well. This is the last book for July, and that is The Ex-Human, Science Fiction and the Fate of Our Species by Michael Barabé, and I will put a picture, of course, of all of the books that I don't have up here for you to see. So this is a 2024 release, and I'll just read a little bit of the description of this book. Facing threats like climate change and nuclear warfare, science fiction authors have conjured apocalyptic scenarios of human extinction. Can such gloomy fates help us make sense of our contemporary crises? How important is the survival of our species if we wind up battling for an Earth that has become an uninhabitable hellscape? What other possible futures do narratives of the end of humanity allow us to imagine? And so this book covers a wide range of dystopian and kind of apocalyptic fiction, including both written and film, including discussion of Parable of the Sower and its sequel, Parable of the Talents. So I'm going to plan to read this one closer to the end of the month, when I've immersed myself in Parable of the Sower, since it's been so long since I read it. And I think it will be an interesting, perhaps, source of some discussion questions or ideas for our chat about Parable. So that is my July really nonfiction heavy TBR, which I look forward to reading at least some of, and probably some other things too that I haven't thought of yet. If you've read any of these books and have thoughts, do share with me in the comments. As well, if you have anything in particular that you are really keen to read for July, or that you've read recently that you loved, do share. I love talking about books. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.